This video is a full guide to non-meditation. Instead of striving for awakening in some imaginary future moment, non-meditation is about simply recognizing your true nature right now, which is effortlessly peaceful, wise, and effective. But effort is the only way you've achieved anything in life so far, right? And along comes this guy with his tiny YouTube channel telling you to abandon it. I know I'm asking a lot, but I'm backed by 30,000 hours of study and practice, formal instruction from teachers both Buddhist and secular, my wife's degrees in neuropsychology, and my own stable, effortless well-being. Plus, the remarkable results I've seen in around 100 close students to date. In my last two videos, we established why effort is your problem and how it's reinforcing a self-identity that's obscuring your true nature. This video will answer the final practical question: how exactly do you give up your effortful practice of developing virtuous qualities? And how do you instead recognize your already virtuous nature? I'm going to tell you, first, by pointing you to a glimpse of that nature right here, right now. And second, by giving you a loose 6-step framework you can use if you need support in making that glimpse more and more frequently until your already enlightened nature becomes obvious. Now, if you can simply apply the core practice I'm about to share with you in all the circumstances of your life, you will not need that 6-step framework. It is not another rigid technique to master. It is optional and it is loose. The core practice is to simply rest as awareness. That's it. If this seems too simple for you, listen on. There's a paradox here. Strictly speaking, it's a stretch to even call that instruction I just shared a practice. Another way to phrase it would be simply do nothing. But when we've been habituated to efforting for decades, the possibility of doing nothing is way outside our range of experience. Thus, the teachings of non-duality across time and culture have, each in their own way, made varying degrees of provisional concessions to the thinking mind, to the doer we all take ourselves to be when we come to this practice. Think of these concessions like a hand, made of nothing but pure space, reaching out and inviting you into that space where both it and you will dissolve, leaving you one with that space and thus at peace. What is to follow in this video is my own synthesis of these concessions. This synthesis is uniquely suited to our time, our circumstances, and you'll understand how as we move through it. So, if you're like every other practitioner was when they first heard the instruction to rest as awareness, your thinking mind will crave elaboration. Elaboration is to be abandoned. But I will elaborate to help you abandon elaboration. I told you there was paradox. Awareness is like space. It is not a thing. But when we use words, we have no choice but to refer to it as such. Awareness is not made of anything, and its nature does not change. In your direct experience, free of speculation about what came from where, that which appears within awareness does so spontaneously, as if in a dream. Awareness can be occupied by anything, but is affected by nothing. It is inherently clear, open, and without boundary. It is the means by which everything is experienced, both what you label inner and outer, what you label thought, what you label emotion, memory, sense data, or event. But awareness does not label. It is the space in which labels appear. Awareness does not interpret. It is the space in which interpretations appear. Awareness knows everything that appears, just as it is. It has no need to make sense of, elaborate, or change anything. Thus, it is inherently peaceful, content, and wise. Since awareness does not elaborate, it is free of the stories we tell that perpetuate stress, dissatisfaction, suffering. The moment we rest, we unsubscribe from these mental fabrications. They cannot continue. What we're left with is bare sensation, data, phenomena, stuff. Now, instead of spiraling into patterns of grief, shame, guilt, and anxiety, we merely rest as the awareness of a sensation in the chest or stomach that perhaps we would typically label as some afflictive emotion. And by not investing that sensation with meaning, we allow it to pass, as is its nature, without creating more stuff in reaction to it. Again, awareness is not a thing. It has no substance or characteristics. Thus, you cannot see it, nor touch it, nor comprehend it as you would a concept. It is not an object. Thus, you cannot observe it. It is not a subject, for it is the space in which all subjects, all selves, appear. When you see this, the experience of a subject itself becomes an object. When this is recognized thoroughly, the mental process of subject-object relativity ceases, and what is called non-duality is realized. Awareness can only be recognized in the same way that space is recognized. And this is what you are to do in this practice I encourage. When you remove all the furniture from a room, it seems like there is more space in the room. But this space was never diminished, no matter how cluttered the room was. The key point here is recognition. Truly, there is nothing stopping anyone from recognizing that awareness is the basis of all their experience, whether they're in a meditation hall or a war zone, though we can certainly say that in the latter environment it would be wiser to run than to contemplate all of this. This is why, to someone who insists that they cannot recognize awareness, I recommend they simply continue practicing a deliberate meditative technique. This is yet another concession. It isn't that awareness is somehow not present for that individual. That would be impossible. They couldn't be having an experience at all if they were not aware. Rather, it's simply that they are preoccupied with the clutter in their room and thus do not appreciate the space in which the clutter exists. I can stand alongside this person and tell them, there's plenty of space in here. It's only occupied temporarily, but this person is so attached to their clutter that there is simply no convincing them. So, due only to their insistence, they must first clean out the room, to some degree at least, and only then will they appreciate the space. This is a metaphor for using a deliberate meditation technique to calm the mind. Now, having given a thorough pointing to what is to be recognized in the practice of non-meditation, let's get practical. Can you be aware of your left hand? Don't look for any special experience. We're talking about the most ordinary experience you can have. Just be aware of your left hand, exactly as it is, in your direct experience, right now. Don't think about it. Don't try to locate it. Just be aware of it, however it appears. Got it? Now, in the same way, be aware of being aware. Again, don't look for anything special to occur. Any image you've ever had about what it might be like to glimpse awakening is itself just more stuff. The basis of that image is awareness. The basis of your left hand is awareness. Recognize that basis of everything, that ever-present space in which you know that you know. If you question whether you got it, that question is arising within awareness. If you try to imagine it, that image is arising within awareness. If you doubt that you're doing it correctly, that doubt is arising within awareness. If you experience that you got it but then lost it, that getting and losing is arising within awareness. There is no experience that occurs outside of awareness. That is impossible. So now, again, freshly, be aware of your left hand. Now, again, in the same way, be aware of being aware. Now, again, be aware of anything that arises in response to your attempt to recognize awareness as itself arising within awareness. Pause the video here, play around with this for a while if you need. And if you experience that this just isn't working for you, don't worry, you just need a further concession. And we're going to get into it in a moment. If this pointing did work for you, friend, congratulations, you just won the cosmic lottery. To experience even a glimpse of this recognition is a privilege no material victory can match. Recognition is typically accompanied by a sense of relief, spaciousness, ease, clarity, of returning home. Returning home is apt because what you're recognizing is not something new, but something that has always been. The more we recognize that awareness is what we are and always have been, the more we see that all the mental emotional processes we've run that cause stress, dissatisfaction, suffering, were only ever like ripples in water. They never truly harmed us. So all there is to do now is to make this recognition more and more frequently. Rest as awareness, just for a brief moment, whenever you remember. Rest as the space in which all is as it is, without interpretation, judgment, label, or description. Rest in that comfort and ease that is not gratification, but is beyond harm. Do you see, friend, how this process is subtractive, not additive? We're not adding something to you. We're letting go. We're surrendering. The more you practice this non-meditation, the more absurd it will seem to you that you ever lived any other way. Those afflictive mental emotional processes will themselves look more and more absurd to you. Thus, you will run them less and less. You will relax more and more. And when this is the default mode in which you live, you have awakened to your true nature. You have put down the burden you've been carrying all these decades. You are enlightened. Not by struggling to develop virtuous qualities, but by recognition of what is and always has been so. Now, those virtuous qualities for which you strived, they manifest spontaneously. And all there is to do is allow the unfolding of naturally arising beneficial intent. I'll talk more about this in future videos. But now, for many students I've worked with, the simple recognition we just walked through simply doesn't give enough for them to grab onto. It's not substantial enough. So I make a further concession. There is no shame in needing this concession. Relatively speaking, we each come to this practice with different conditioning, and we must start where we are. Now, honestly, if you've stuck with this video to this point, even if it didn't make much sense to you, you are already among rare and privileged company. What I'm going to explain now is a 6-step framework you can use as training wheels for your practice of non-meditation. Importantly, you are on the same bike. You're still pedaling, still moving, still doing the basic recognition I described above. All these training wheels do for you is provide stability. This is not another technique to master. And the students I've taken through this framework each find that they can remove their training wheels at different times. You do not have to see this through like a rigid methodology. Think of the steps not as a march, but rather as a dance. You can move forward and backward as you please. You can take breaks. You can do another dance entirely, sometimes if you prefer. For example, your previous meditation practice, if it still brings benefit. The goal is to remove the training wheels as soon as possible. And you'll know when they're no longer necessary. Just as when a child is learning to ride a bike, it can be seen that their training wheels at some point no longer touch the ground. Step 1 is resting in seclusion. You'll be comfortable here because this is somewhat like ordinary meditation. The difference is that you're not applying a technique to achieve an altered state of consciousness or to change anything about yourself. You don't have to sit a particular way. You don't even have to close your eyes. Rather, you're just being in a distraction-free environment and giving some dedicated time to the practice of natural rest. Here are the instructions. 1. Sit comfortably, alone, and kill your phone. 2. Rest as awareness, accepting what is as it is, without interpretation, judgment, label, or description. 3. When an interpretation, judgment, label, description arises, rest as the awareness of it and allow it to pass like a ripple in water. 4. Each time you remember to rest, acknowledge this as successful practice. 5. Repeat steps 2 to 4. It's that simple, but I'll repeat. Rest as awareness, accepting what is as it is, without interpretation, judgment, label, or description. When an interpretation, judgment, label, or description arises, rest as the awareness of it and allow it to pass like a ripple in water. Each time you remember to rest, acknowledge this as successful practice. My next video will be a long guided practice that you can use to aid you here and in the upcoming steps of this framework. I will put a link in the description of this video when that new one is published, so save this video and return later for that resource. Now, if you're like most people, your first question at this point is, how long should I do this for? You might be used to setting a timer for your meditations, but we don't do that here. Rather, the instruction is to enjoy the practice. If you only enjoy it for 30 seconds the first time you do it, fine. But when you enjoy something, you want to do it. When you want to do something, you do it a lot. And when you do it a lot, you get the benefit. This is not about discipline. That's just more stuff. Once you're enjoying this step, resting in seclusion, you can try the next. Step 2 is resting in motion. Now you're going to take this practice for a walk. The instructions are exactly the same, except for the sitting part, of course. Importantly, you must choose a relatively quiet spot at this stage, a beach, a wood, a hiking trail. The less people are around, the better. See, what we're doing with this step-by-step framework is slowly introducing more stuff into your experience as you practice. At this step, step 2, you're going to have nature in your field of vision. You're going to have sounds of wildlife in your ears, and of course, the sensations of walking. That's quite a lot compared with sitting at home. But again, the practice is the same. If when you try step 2, you find that you remember to rest any less than once per minute, I recommend hopping back to step 1 and continuing to enjoy your recognition there. But don't make this into a standard, okay? Be playful. Treat this like a game. Dance these steps 1 and 2 with curiosity. What happens when you try step 2 again? What happens if you alternate them? What happens if you dedicate another week to step 1 alone? Experiment. Step 3 is resting in public. And this may seem much more challenging at first. The setting now is somewhere a lot of strangers are amassed, a city centre, a mall, a cafe, a restaurant. Again, the practice remains exactly the same, but the challenge now comes from the fact that there will be much more seductive phenomena. You will judge people. You will interpret words you hear as they pass. You will speculate on what they might be thinking about you. But these are all just more ripples on the surface of that water of awareness. And you know how to practice by now. The challenge is, of course, continuing to make your recognition in the midst of these more seductive phenomena, which seem to demand that you invest them with meaning, that you reify them. As before, dance between the steps as necessary. Step 1 is still useful here. The more stable your rest at home, the easier you'll find it to rest in nature and, in turn, in public. Step 4 is resting in temptation. Relatively speaking, this is where things get really challenging. Yet, still, on the absolute level, awareness remains perfectly clear, right here to be recognized as you now practice while scrolling your social media feed. But you know the drill by now. You know the practice. We're just introducing yet more seductive phenomena into the picture. Step 5 is resting in conversation. This can be thought of as the final boss, in a way. You're now faced with a real human being who will seem to demand all kinds of interpretation, judgment, and reification from you. But again, you know what to do. Certain conversations may seem more difficult than others. That's fine. But remember, awareness is the only way you're aware that any conversation is occurring. This is what you are to recognize. Continue dancing among all these 5 steps until they are easy. At some point, you'll stop being concerned with how long or how frequently you're practicing. In fact, the entire notion of practice will begin to seem absurd to you. And that's when you're finally ready to come full circle. Step 6 is simply resting as awareness. We've looped right back around to the first recommendation I made in this video before I introduced the framework. To simply rest as awareness in any and all circumstances. This is the removal of your training wheels. Now you need no support. Nonetheless, you may find that there are still some circumstances in which you wobble a bit. That's fine. Again, some of us are able to practice in this undirected way from the beginning, without the training wheels. Others of us need one or more of the steps I laid out. All that matters is what works for you. When I give direct guidance to a student, the process is more dynamic. We begin with the possibility of practicing with no training wheels. Then we discuss which of the circumstances of that individual's life seem difficult to rest in, to accept as they are. Then we place our attention there, usually inventing a supportive practice that's tailored to them and their situation. Sometimes, though, we just talk about the circumstance that's bothering them and apply to it, the non-dual view. We do this as much as is required for them to let go of their interpretations, and then they recognize that they were in fact always free in that circumstance. It was only those mental emotional processes they were running that were obscuring their wide open nature. Now, before we finish, there are two common struggles that people tend to have with all of this. The first is the "am I doing it right" trap. We've all heard fantastical spiritual teachings that present awakening as some kind of mystical experience. I used to think it would be like tripping on acid all the time. In some ways, it is, just without the hallucinations. But guess what? All mystical experiences occur within the basic space of awareness, just like everything else. Are you interested in mystical experiences? Or are you interested in fundamental truth? A famous teacher named Trungpa Rinpoche said, "Enlightenment is the ego's ultimate disappointment." The ego wants magic. It wants stuff it can post on spiritual Reddit communities that will get hundreds of upvotes. And it wants to use these to verify that it is, in fact, doing it right. But the you who wants to do it right is the very thing that must be seen through. It never existed as anything outside of awareness. It came and went within that basic space, just like all other stuff does. Impermanent, temporary, fleeting, empty. Seeing this is doing it right. But there's no fanfare. You won't get a halo. Just stop asking, "Am I doing it right?" The moment you ask that question, you're back to engaging in speculative thinking. You've reverted to the old striving-based, effort-based model. The only way to do what I'm talking about wrong is to try too hard. Because awareness is the most obvious thing there is. It's the ultimate expression of hidden in plain sight. It cannot be found elsewhere. So stop searching, stop striving, stop efforting. The second common problem in this practice is the problem of forgetting. You will forget to rest. You will forget to recognize. The antidote to this is to become fascinated with the practice and enjoy it. Please do not blame yourself when you forget. This again reinforces ego. And do not wish you were remembering more often. This again reinforces ego. But of course, if blaming or wishing arises, you know what to do. There is an aid you can use to help you remember if you wish. Download an app called Insight Timer and set the meditation bell to sound at regular intervals. When you hear the bell, rest as awareness. Play with the frequency to find a setting that suits you, then make it more and more frequent until you no longer need it. Of course, you can use this in all steps of the practice framework I've explained. And if you struggle to get the bell set up, let me know in a comment and I'll reply with instructions. Now, if you made it this far with me, friend, well done. I am enormously glad that you have, and it's been a great privilege to walk you through this detailed guide on the practice of non-meditation. We've come through the core practice of resting as awareness, the 6-step training wheels framework, and we've cleared up the most common problems people have with it all. This framework is for you to use as a tool. Again, as soon as you're ready, let it fall away. Then simply rest as awareness in any and all circumstances, recognizing more and more the inherent clarity, peace, and contentment that is your true nature. If you have a question I've not covered, please drop it in a comment, but the best way to get personalized guidance is to take my 1-minute quiz. You'll find a link below. If you liked this teaching, give it a like. If you want more teachings like it, subscribe. And if you want to be sure that you don't miss that guided practice I'll be uploading next, hit the notification bell. I hope to see you there.